toughest spot in the room. Quieten you all down while you eat, and we kick off our special keynote. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of all of us at BMO, I hope you're having a productive conference so far, and I hope you enjoyed the morning. I thought it was outstanding. As I said when we opened, it's great that we're all here together again. Today, we are very pleased to present Robert Friedland, founder and executive chairman of Ivanhoe Mines, as our keynote speaker. Robert is well known to all of you, a man of influence, an entrepreneurial explorer, a technology innovator, and a company builder. I'm looking forward to his perspectives and insights during his talk, Mining Reinvented, Mining as a Means to the End. Before we get to Robert, we'd also like to take a moment to introduce one of our other esteemed guests. Since 2015, BMO Capital Markets has awarded the Women in Metals and Energy Finance Scholarship to a female student at London's Imperial College in the MSc program in Metals and Energy Finance. This scholarship is a meaningful way that we can support diversity in education, global financial services, and the metals and mining sector. We have honored intelligent and vibrant young women annually, and this year our recipient is no less exceptional. Unfortunately, she could not join us today with some of her own travel restrictions. Gloria Stongwe earned her BSc in Metallurgy and Mineral Processing at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, her native country. She's now in the MSc program, building on her curiosity beyond metallurgy and mining economic projects. Congratulations to Gloria. And now I'll turn it over to our guest today, Mr. Robert Friedland.
Thank you, my man. That's good. Well, I'm told that I first spoke to this group 31 years ago when it was Burns Fry in Whistler. And I've been served for lunch now for the 7th time and 15 times as a keynote speaker. So this is the first time I can recall giving a speech while we're threatened by a madman with nuclear war. But at any rate, I'm going to try to make the best of it despite the profound inventions, the sort of feelings I'm having about what I'm seeing on television before I come here. So we'll start with our planet Earth and our common humanity, because I try to give a very similar speech in Riyadh. If you're living at the North Pole, you're standing still, but if you live on the equator, our Earth is spinning at approximately 1,037 miles per hour. But our little ball of iron and silica is hurtling through empty space at 67,000 miles per hour. That's our little common spaceship. We're moving at about 30 kilometers per second, all of us. But our solar system itself is rotating in the Milky Way, and the speed of our solar system is 490,000 miles per hour, or 220 kilometers per second. And so it's, having been in mining so long, we want to talk about our fragile Earth and what this enterprise has always represented as the most basic of human activity. So I want to start with Carl Sagan. I would, to all of you, if you ever want to read anything insanely great that is sort of after the scriptures were written, The Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan is one of the most interesting things ever written about how we sit in the universe. Referring to the first visions of Earth taken from outer space, because he was a great astrophysicist, he says, look at that dot. That's here, that's home, that's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, everyone who ever lived out their lives. That's part of the pale blue dot. We took the trouble to go a little deeper into it this morning. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and every forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. So this is when our species began to realize that we live on a common earth and we have this incredible capability to blow each other up. But the human mind-body process really hasn't evolved that far, and we have to be very careful. When we talk about mineral exploration and we talk about mining, we want you to understand that oil and gas actually is mining. There's a picture of Thomas Barger taken in the 1930s. So if you look at that black square where we say oil, that is the scale of the oil industry in the world. Compared to the other metals, you see copper there, and you see aluminum, and you see nickel, and you see cobalt, and my God, they get kind of small down there in the lower corner. But when you're looking at the scale of the hydrocarbon industry and you want to disrupt it, it's like trying to get the contents of the Hoover Dam through a garden hose. And so much of what you're reading in newspapers is best only for wrapping dead fish on the third day, because the common media really doesn't understand the scale of what we're talking about here. So the Gawar field was the largest mineral discovery in the history of this particular planet. It sits in sedimentary geology in the eastern forelands of Saudi Arabia. It was a tiny little junior company called the Canadian American Standard Oil Company, and that guy there, dressed up in his Arab garb, he was actually a geologist working in the Northwest Territories of Canada. Then he worked for Anaconda Minerals looking for copper, and when the Great Depression came, he couldn't get a job. He got a job working as a surveyor in Saudi Arabia. Now, what was that like in 1938? Just think about what Saudi Arabia was when you talk about political risk. Yes, they had camels, and they had goats, and they had sheep, and they had camels. He kind of went native. And working with a local Bedouin, they saw this anticlinal formation, enormous formation, and the famous Danam number 7 well drilled in 1938 resulted in the discovery of Gawar. Now, we love that kind of guy, and I'm going to show you why. So there's Thomas Barger, probably taken in the 1930s with his buddy Ernie Berg. This guy was all over Canada. He had a job at Anaconda. He worked at a silver mine as an assistant manager in the Northwest Territories. And then he discovered the biggest thing that's ever been found on this planet. Take a good look at him. The Gawar field is the largest mineral discovery ever made on this particular planet. It sits in the sedimentary geology in the eastern forelands of Saudi Arabia. I was in Riyadh just a few days ago, and it's very interesting to understand the impact of Gawar, because without the Saudis, ladies and gentlemen, we have no energy security today at all. Without the Saudis, people are going to freeze in the dark, and it's going to take a long time to get off of the hydrocarbon addiction. Don't hold your breath. It won't happen tomorrow morning. This is the infrastructure that resulted from a discovery in a sedimentary basin today. That is literally the infrastructure on which the world depends, because the Saudi government, His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz, the head of OPEC for the Saudis, has to negotiate with Vladimir Putin in OPEC+. The sanctions are spinning out of control, and without this energy, we don't have the society that we enjoy. And so a more sober understanding of the role of oil and gas and its importance to human progress is required. So this is the kind of infrastructure that happens today to keep the world's lights on. And getting off of something at this scale ain't going to be easy. Now, here we are in another sedimentary basin. This is in the western forelands of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I wish I still had that orange shirt. I loved it. But standing next to me is Dave Broughton and Dave Edwards. And I want to show you what Dave looks like today. That's his wiki page. He looks a lot like that fellow that found the largest mineral discovery in the world. And this really is the largest discovery of copper. It sits in a sedimentary basin. If I came from Mars and I was sent here by my masters, and incidentally, there is evidence of the potential of extraterrestrial life. Maybe we are literally just bacteria in a petri dish, compared to some people that can go Mach 25. We're not sure, but this kind of spirit is absolutely identical to the spirit that found Gawar. And a lot of people freak out. They say, oh my God, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, there's pygmies there with a blowgun, they'll kill you, or a lion will come out and eat you. And it's really nothing like what you would imagine at all. So when we talk about the only alternative to that crude oil, we look at copper metal. Of course, it is the best electrical conductor other than gold and silver, which are too expensive for the purpose. And we look at all the copper that's ever been mined. It's about 430 meters by 430 meters. 80% of this copper still is being used in human existence. Nobody ever consciously throws it away. And we're mining about 21 million tons of this copper on this pale blue dot. And you can see the Eiffel Tower for scale. It's about 324 meters tall. So if we look at this Dr. Copper, this green metal, and we go back to, say, 4000 BC, as a species, since we evolved from monkeys, we've mined 700 million metric tons throughout human history. 700 million metric tons with an enormous effort. That includes moving the steam shovels that the Guggenheim family bought from the digging of the Panama Canal. They were moved to Chile. They're moved up there to a high elevation to start mining Chuquicamata in Chile. Just to maintain 3% GDP growth, just to maintain stable GDP growth, we need 700 million metric tons to maintain world GDP growth at 3% in the next 22 years. We have to mine as much copper. I'm not talking about electrification now. I'm just talking about GDP growth. We need to mine as much copper as mined in human history in the next 22 years. If you think this is easy, you're going to be crazy. We see a train wreck coming in the mining industry. I'm not trying to be alarmist, but we're now entering the electric everything era because this is politically correct. This is response to potential global response to anthropomorphic effects on the climate of this very planet, which exists in a very thin biosphere and looks like it's really being affected by our own activities. So if we're going to electrify everything, that's going to have a huge impact on the mining industry. Renewable technology for renewable energy is absurdly metals intensive. Wind and solar energy need between 7 times and 37 times more copper per unit of electrical energy than conventional electricity. So we're sitting here in the United States and I've got these bright lights in my eyes. About half of our static load is still generated by burning coal. So we have a long, long, long way to go to start talking about these numbers. General Electric has now been building wind machines that are as tall as the Eiffel Tower. They're as tall as 30, 40, 50-story building. They're getting bigger and bigger. This next generation is a 12-megawatt offshore turbine. They're the largest piece of rotating machinery that human beings have ever invented. Just these things in the next 5 or 6 years, which is tomorrow morning, are going to consume 5.5 million tons of copper metal. Now, if I'm flying north with my girlfriend and I'm a Canadian goose and I look at her, poof, there's just a big puff of feathers because the wingtip velocity of these giant turbines is so fast that I can't see it coming. There is no way to generate energy on this planet that somebody isn't going to complain about. Certainly the bald eagles don't like this idea very much, but these things are going up all over the planet. Now, America's power grid is increasingly unreliable. You remember that fire in Paradise, California? A lot of people died. This happened since we last met 2 years ago. That power line was 106 years old going to Paradise, California. The American electrical grid is literally like an old lady laying in bed waiting to die. If we all plugged in our Tesla Model 3 at 5 p.m., we fried the entire grid. A little bit of cold weather took down all of the power in Texas. Just a little cold wave took down the power in Texas. By the way, Texas has its own independent grid for some bizarre reason. It's not connected to the rest of the United States, which is proof that Texans are a little different. But if we want to upgrade our aging, ridiculous grid, actually the Chinese think it will take in the trillions of dollars. And aluminum is trading at an all-time high as I'm speaking to you now. Yes, you can substitute some aluminum, but in the grid, the requirement for copper is beyond your wildest imagination if we are to have a responsive, intelligent grid. Now, Larry Fink, who runs BlackRock, is running the largest fund management organization. He's definitely drinking this Kool-Aid. And when these major fund management organizations start demanding change, as he says, we're at an inflection point where awareness of climate change is becoming more widespread. I believe we're on the edge of a fundamental reshaping of finance. Once the people that control the money start wanting to see the ESG characteristics of mining, this is going to drive a huge amount of change. Goldman Sachs. I've been working for an amazing startup, ABEX Technologies, and we've been doing these podcasts. You should go to Smarter Markets, and you can hear Jeff Curry. He's amazing. He's calling this a molecule crisis. We are literally out of everything. I don't care if it's oil, gas, coal, copper, aluminum, you name it. We're out of it. Now, how do we get here? We both comment at length on these Smarter Markets podcasts. I would, if you'd like to go jogging and have me in your cerebral cortex, take a listen. Here's a film about what we're doing, what it takes to build just one mine, what we go through to build one mine, one little source of copper. Go ahead, we'll give you an idea of how long this takes. I want to watch it. Is there any sound? Thank you. I'm scheduled to be 36 a second time in August. So it takes a very big chunk of a human lifespan to bring on one major copper discovery. So you don't know what I go through emotionally when I see that, because we have 11,600 people working there today, human beings trying to be part of the solution as opposed to being part of a problem. And how rare it is actually to have a mine of that scale and to find a sedimentary basin of the scale of Gowar in a country that really deserves that economic development, but how hard it is to satisfy all the environmental and social and governance characteristics, which is why our president is a woman, and we've discovered that women are actually better than men in the mining industry. So we're trying to reinvent the entire industry from the ground up. With a clean sheet of paper, everything we've always done is different. So we're looking for decades of high commodity prices, according to Evie. I think Evie was Crook last night, but he's here. He's head of thematic investing at BlackRock. And some of the fund managers are beginning to realize and get their feeling that this is really going to be hard, because these big mining companies, they're organized like gigantic law firms, gigantic donut-shaped law firms. And they're being called upon to give the capital back. Tinto Rio paid a $16 billion dividend, means that they can't think of a better way to use that $16 billion to build a new mine. But if they don't build new mines, what's going to happen here? So those of you that think you're going to buy a Tesla or one of the fantastic number of choices you want, we need, just for 20 million EV charging points, we've got 280 million cars in the United States. Only 1 million of them are electric today. We have 280 million cars running on hydrocarbon just in this country. We need a huge amount of copper for the charging points. Passenger EVs will require close to 4 million tons of copper per year. And so that gigantic copper mine that we're building in the Congo, phase by phase, will be the second largest in the world for sure. It's still only a tiny beginning, timid answer to the scale of the demand that we require. When I grew up, a Ford Mustang with a V8 engine used 20 kilograms of copper in a traditional V8 car, and then the Japanese came out with the hybrids. Toyota was first, the Prius, 40 kilograms of copper. Then we came in with like the Lucid or a big Tesla Model S. You're talking about 100 kilograms of copper per car, and now people are talking about electric trucks like the Ford F-150, which need a truckload of copper per car, but that's just for the car. That's not how we engineer, design, and transmit electrical energy. So here's Mary Barra. She says, we need millions of EVs on the road to make a meaningful impact towards building a zero-emission world. Bullshit. Millions of EVs on the road makes no meaningful impact towards building a zero-emission world. It's just that Tesla gave GM a hot foot. But we need, if you look at womb to tomb, cradle to grave, sperm to germ, how much global warming gas we generate to do all this, there's nothing easy about any of this. There's nothing easy about convincing your brokers to finance a mine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo or anywhere else. So the scale of the challenge we face as a species with these rare metals, if you really want to stop burning hydrocarbon, is immense beyond belief. Volkswagen says they're going to be the largest EV manufacturer in just a few short years, 22 million EVs. I'm talking to the Germans. I'm an advisor now to the board of one of the major German automobile manufacturers. I can assure you the pucker factor is coming. I ask you to think why Elon really sold some shares. Just think about it for a minute. Where do you think the nickel and the copper and the cobalt is going to come from to make these batteries in a few short years? However, if you go to Hollywood, I have a film studio investment that I made there. They have cop cars. They're Teslas, 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. As I've been saying, they will catch you because the torque of an electric motor just blows an internal combustion engine right off the map. It's, this ludicrous acceleration that pushes your eyeballs into the back of your head, and that motor will run 1 million miles. And so, the electrical car revolution is here. Tesla has announced they expect a global battery mineral shortage. We expect global shortages of nickel, copper, other EV battery materials due to underinvestment in the mineral sector. The automobile industry is like a bunch of 12 guys, with playing musical chairs, I think maybe they'd be lucky to have 3 of them getting the raw materials they need to actually build these electric cars. This is not exaggeration I'm telling you about. This is actual fact. Don't read what don't believe what you read in the newspapers. Listen to me. We're in the mining business, and we know how hard it is to actually go out there and engineer, design, and find and build a mine and run it responsibly. Now, Mercedes has come up with this. I'm sure my grandson would like one of those cars. 1,000 kilometers of charge, physically beautiful. Everybody is going to want one. I mean, there's 1.3 billion people in China. There's another 1.2 billion people in India. Everybody wants one of those cars. How? So we're looking at explosions in copper demand just for the electric car industry. I'm just talking about for the car itself, never mind how we generate power and transmit it, just explosions. And then we've got these new electrical aircraft. There's over 215 of these things. These are battery-driven, high-energy density batteries. And then we come to the next alternative, which is hydrogen, because we only have one periodic table to work with. Hydrogen is the most plentiful element in the universe. Helium is in second place, number 2, and then there's lithium, number 3, the lightest of metals. Airbus wants to use that energy density to have a hydrogen-powered aircraft, but all hydrogen-related technologies at the end-user point rely on platinum metal. All hydrogen technologies still rely on platinum metal. So actually, they've taken an Airbus A380 and they put a 5th engine on there that's going to burn hydrogen. Alstom, which is a huge company in Europe, is going to convert all of Great Britain's trains to hydrogen fuel cells. I mean, this is like an enormous project. Every single train in Great Britain is being converted to get rid of all diesel by 2040. So when you build a hydrogen fuel cell car like the Toyota Mirai, the platinum intensity goes up 5-fold. A traditional catalytic converter uses platinum to get rid of NOx and SOx out of the tailpipe. But when you want to go to a zero-emission vehicle, I'm sorry, but you need our platinum. And I think palladium was up $155 an ounce this morning for all the worst conceivable reasons that my heart and soul can conjure up. But we live in a world where people are just beginning to wake up to the whole concept of the supply chain. You've been hearing that word lately? I'm sick and tired of the word catalyst and various other words I hear from bankers. But the problem is that people that live in urban environments have no concept whatsoever of the mystical concept of a supply chain. People that live, in Montana or Wyoming, they have to kill a cow. They understand a supply chain. So the Republicans tend to come from a society, that's one of our tribes, that sort of has an understanding that you do need oil and gas, or you do need cows, or there's 40 million pigs a month being slaughtered in a river of blood outside Chicago if you still eat your bacon. And so a lot of people that live in an urban environment, they actually think that ham sandwich comes out of a refrigerator. And we're just beginning to understand how fragile the global supply chain is when somebody goes and grabs all of Ukraine and it's a huge amount of the world's food. Or without even firing a shot, takes Kazakhstan, which is a lot of the oil and a lot of the uranium. Like there's a big game being played here now, and this isn't just for electrification. This is for national security, ladies and gentlemen. This is for our lives. The whole game has changed now. 2 years ago, we thought, everybody wants to be green, and we're going to need these metals for electrification. Now it's coming to much more primal purpose. And we're in a very, very dangerous period, and the best thing we can do is pray. A sustained rise in battery metals, just crazy numbers we're looking at for nickel and copper. The green lines there are a zero-emission scenario. We got a tough enough problem with stated policies and historical metal production. We need massive amounts of new capital in mines. It's actually irresponsible for Rio Tinto to pay a dividend. It means that they can't come up with a better idea. Maybe they inadvertently destroyed a human settlement for 8 days of iron ore mining, a 45,000-year-old human settlement. Maybe their lawyers scared them, and the investors demanded a dividend. But if people don't get mining and produce these metals, we're going to have a huge problem. And then we have these viruses. 2 years ago, my son was wearing white gloves. We were in this room, and we were freaking out about this virus that came from China. Coronavirus is live forever on stainless steel if you sneeze on stainless steel. Viruses love stainless steel, plastic the same. So copper passively kills all viruses and all bacteria in 3 days. So the friendly green bug fighter works in all the hospitals in the world, and we're slowly in the process of waking up to this new disruptive use for the metal. You need at least 60% copper in the metal. You can use bronze, you can use brass, as long as about 60% of the copper is there. It disrupts the chemistry of all microbes and bacteria. So here's an example. If you go to Sao Paulo, Brazil, all the new airport, all those handrails that used to be stainless steel, they're in copper. And when you enter the country and you put your passport down, they're in copper. And that's not really a copper mining country. It's just that people are beginning to realize that if you go to the bathroom in the flu season in Toronto and you touch a stainless steel doorknob, you better use a paper towel, because that's where the viruses come from in flu season. So this is our existential dilemma. We're right about where demand is sitting there. We're on the edge of the cliff. Even if we get Kamoa-Kakula to 1 million tons of copper a year, and yes, we're working on it quickly, we need 9 or 10 new Kakulas by the end of this decade, and these things are really, really hard to find. We started in 1996 in the Congo, and we made the initial discoveries in 2008 and 2007, and even with a 5-year construction period. There is no response to metals price rising from the mining industry. We have incredible demand and very, very slow supply response. The energy needed to produce copper has now increased 16-fold in the last 100 years, and the water consumption per unit of copper has doubled. There's Bisbee, Arizona, 100 years ago. In the old days, we mined high grade. If my mine is 10 times the grade of your mine, we're using 1/10 of the steel, 1/10 of the concrete, 1/10 of the electricity, 1/10 of the water per unit of metal produced. But these gigantic, stupid, low-grade Chilean copper mines, their grades are declining. So we're using more and more energy per unit of copper produced, and it's not sustainable. Escondida, the biggest copper mine in the world, has had about a 66% grade reduction in the last 10 or 12 years. So you're grinding up mounds of rock that dwarfs this room with using up huge amounts of water, which doesn't exist, to get less and less copper metal in order to reduce global warming gas. Think about what I'm trying to tell you, because you won't read about this in newspapers. I guarantee you the New York Times doesn't understand. And meanwhile, people want to stop climate change. That requires copper. Why don't they want more copper mining in Chile? The Chilean government is now talking about nationalizing all mines. Money's a coward. It flees at the first sign of trouble. When I said the Democratic Republic of the Congo was much safer than Chile 3 years ago, people freaked out. I said it in London. People thought that was an outrageous statement. They're quite quiet now about what's happening in Latin America, because when they say Yankee, go home, they really mean it. Kennecott and Anaconda were American companies that were nationalized by the Chileanos. Now they're called Codelco. Even though the CIA killed President Allende, who did that, the subsequent Chilean government still kept the mines. So the Chilean mines, man, they're old and they're tired, and they need huge amounts of electrical energy, and they're not sustainable. So Chile is not the answer. You can build a mine there, that's fine. But at the scale of the problem I'm trying to explain to you, we have a really serious amount of work to do. So, I started calling this the Revenge of the Miners. We had the music from Star Wars that used to play in the beginning, but we need a huge amount of your capital. Fortunately, it might not come just from BMO's clients. There's a lot of non-traditional investors suddenly waking up to the fact that the world needs this metal. There's a lot of smart money interested in the scale of the transformation. This is about our company, because I have this opportunity to show you what we've been doing, and I think it's worth a watch, and then I'll come back after I've had some water. Thank you. that's enough advertising. It's just want to tell you what a miserable, difficult business mining really is. We have a love-hate relationship with it because the whole thing has to be figured out. Like, why are we mining? We're mining some gold to make some money, to protect ourselves from the government destroying the value of our money by printing money. Is that really what we want to do with our lives? Or do we want the price of our palladium to go up because a psycho is invading a neighboring country for absolutely no reason at all? We're mining to an end. We're trying to leave our children and our grandchildren a better world. It's a very, very difficult thing to do all this. And it needs a huge amount of capital. Let's go back there. Can I go back to that one? Backwards. I don't know. Yeah, that was good. Here we go. If you get it right, this is your share price compared to everybody else. I stood here 2 years ago trying to explain all this to largely the same people. And Freeport and ourselves are pretty much neck and neck. First Quantum's doing okay too. They're mining copper. You see those gold companies down there and those big majors. They're not doing so well. They're like deer caught in the headlights because we really need to understand what are we trying to do here and how are we trying to do it. Very, very difficult business. A lot of very intelligent people allocating capital. We're welcome to accept all the support you want to lend us. BMO has been helping our enterprises since day one. It was that first mining conference in 1991 at Whistler. It was still Burns Fry in the old days. You know, I'm going to quote from our President of the United States. It's so amazing. I mean, I know he knows nothing about mining. We have almost no mining in the United States. He says, we cannot have the historical injustices that too many mining operations have left behind. Environmental protections are paramount. We have to ensure that these resources actually benefit folks in the community where they live, not just shareholders. Well, hooray! We violently agree that mining has to be reinvented. And that's why women are so important in our enterprise. I'm telling you, women are better than men in the mining industry. We've proven it. So we're taking women in local communities and we're using simulators like a 747. We're training them to operate equipment and they're better with the equipment. The men are alcoholics. They grind the gears. The women have men, they have their children to take care of. And we look at this whole thing holistically to try to make it sustainable. In South Africa, we have 155,000 local, historically disadvantaged people that are equity shareholders in the world's largest precious metals development. They have a stake in it. Same thing here in the Congo. We gave the government, on very attractive terms, a total of 20% of the ownership in the mine. And when you sort of round that sharp edge between the mining company and the host government, you have a chance to make it sustainable. After all, people in a local place, they see us coming in here from Toronto, mining their stuff and taking it away. Of course they're going to say, what's in it for me? The problem is that it's now a challenge of planetary scale, global scale, and we're all in this together. And it's very, very tough, and a lot of people don't understand mining, and so we're just beginning the revenge of the old economy. I think Jeff Curry at Goldman Sachs is saying this better than me, and I'm sure a lot of people are just beginning to understand how important this really is. So I've got 11 minutes more to talk, and I could take questions, but I do want to talk about this because I'm so upset about this. So this picture was taken near Kiev recently. I think the time has come for Western countries to say we're going to have our own little green men. Anybody who wants to volunteer should be allowed to go to Poland and get armed and go in and defend the people of Kiev and Ukraine. I can't stand here and talk to you without talking about this. And you take a look at the impact this has on the supply chain. When Mr. Putin grabs all the food in Ukraine, he takes all the uranium and all the oil in Kazakhstan, and there's less and less sellers of these basic raw materials. Let's say we put sanctions on Mr. Putin. We say you can't use the SWIFT system. He says, fine. I'll sell all my platinum and my palladium and nickel and copper and cobalt to China, not to you guys. Once this starts, once the world is destabilized, it's no longer just about keeping people that read the New York Times happy about electric cars. This is definitely a matter of national security. We need responsible mining in the United States. We need responsible mining in Canada. We need it throughout the Western Hemisphere. Yes, we have to find a way to mine responsibly with the local people in Chile and Peru. But without mining, there is zero chance that there's going to be an energy transition. It's all bullshit. Complete bullshit. And now we're beginning to worry about something else called war. So my prayer to all of you is that our children and our grandchildren have a safe world. And we haven't really evolved very far as a species, have we? So at this stage in my life, I'm mainly worried about my footsteps in the sand. And I'm very worried about this phenomenon because this bastard is trying to control all the metals in the world. And it's difficult to come to a conference and think about making money when this kind of thing is going on. This is not the reason why we want our palladium to go up $150 an ounce this morning. So let's pray for a better world. Let's hope that the mining industry gets the support it needs, and let's hope people begin to understand what the supply chain really is. There's a lot of financial manipulation on Wall Street. A lot of people are doing biodegradable, retractable, subordinated convertible bonds. There's tens of thousands of hedge funds named after Greek gods. When you go out in the real world and you want to build a mine, you've got to live a lot of support to these miners because these salt of the earth type people are the ones on which the world is depending. And it goes back to the discovery of Gawar. Some freak with a beard, the Depression, he goes to, gets a job as a surveyor in Saudi Arabia, and he goes working in a silver mine in the Northwest Territories of Canada to finding the largest, energy resource, the largest thing ever found on this planet. And we've built our civilization on Saudi oil, and we need the Saudis as our friends. They're sitting there watching drones come over from Iran, bombing their facilities right now. If you're long Russia, it's just like Exxon, run by the La Cosa Nostra, armed with nuclear missiles and throwing matches in the Middle East to drive the oil price up. And if you want to get off of that dependency, you got to think about how we're going to get there from here. And that's why in our world, the high priests are the geologists. Because if the geologists don't go out and find this stuff, and I'm telling you, it's really, really hard to develop a Platte Reef. We started in 1987. Yes, it is the largest precious metals deposit in the world, under development. And Kamoa-Kakula, yes, it's the richest copper discovery on a global scale. Everybody knows that's true. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare stand here and say it, and there's no one that can deny it in the audience. The problem is the difficulty of doing it. So if you're going to get a keynote speech here about mining, BMO should be 10 times bigger. The amount of capital allocated to mining should be 50 times larger because the last 20, 30 years, all the money went to broadband, internet, Netflix, the cloud. Young kids all wanted to go in that direction because it was so glamorous. I've seen young Korean kids that wrote an app or had a gaming company and made $10 billion overnight. But the whole enterprise depends on these metals. When you do a Google search, you push that button. Do you think that's free? That Google search uses a huge amount of electrical energy. It's just that it's paid for by advertising, so you don't know. So this whole thing now is coming back to home to roost. In 1918, when World War I started, William Randolph Hearst was mining copper in Butte, Montana. The price of copper went to infinity. He got so rich he bought up all the media in America, just like Jeff Bezos was when he bought the Washington Post. Remember his granddaughter, Patty Hearst? She got kidnapped. So in the past, when you have times of conflict, we've seen molybdenum go from $1 a pound to $30 a pound. What is the appropriate price for the electrically conductive metals if you really want to change the world? Do you really think these poor analysts are right when they're making their little models, their NPV models? NPV models are ridiculous. You should throw them all away. They have no meaning because if I sell my mine to Peter Meredith, my former partner, friend, and brother sitting in that front row, and we apply, say, a 10 or 12% discount rate, it's a 100-year mine. After 10 years, you have to give me the mine back for free or for $1, because once you apply a discount rate to something with the magic of compounding interest, there's nothing left after 10 years. I can assure you the Chinese don't think that way. The way BMO is modeling these mines with these discount rates is insane. If you look at Apple, it's modeled at a zero discount rate. Yes, if you take all the money Apple's going to make in the next 10,000 years and discounted at a zero rate, yes, it is worth $2 or $3 trillion. But why should mines be modeled at an 8 or 10% discount rate if we can't even have a peaceful world without them? So I think Andrew, who's probably the best copper analyst in the world, ought to be given permission by his management to model these mines at a zero discount rate. And then you'll understand what I'm talking about here, because, you know, Ivanhoe Mines will pay you a dividend. I've got 165 million reasons why I want to pay you a dividend. But today I'm really appealing for your true support. I'm going to talk about our little company at 4 o'clock, and I'm really representing all the women and all the men that are making a difference in Africa. And it was tough building that mine ahead of schedule, under budget, with COVID restrictions. It was scary. The intensity and the dedication of our people is worth gigadollars. The culture that we've created to mining is what we need. We need a whole generation of young miners. Yeah, good day, mate. I went to dinner with one from Australia last night. You know, we need Australia. We need Canada. You know, I mean, there's just a huge global task here. Just take a look at the scale of the transformation that we're talking about. And let's not make it just bullshit. Let's try to make it real. So I'm appealing to you as your keynote speaker. I think it's the 7th time I've had lunch. I did this 2 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic. I, like you, am happy to be traveling again. I live on an airplane. We've worked in 63 countries. And I want to say a few words about my young Saudi friends. I just came from Riyadh, and I want to tell you about the stunning transformation of Saudi Arabia in the last year or two. I mean, I first went to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia 30 years ago, and that was the image that I had in my mind. But His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman is in his early 30s, and all the government ministers that I met, save Prince Abdulaziz, are also in their 30s. And the women have now been liberated. They're driving, they're talking, they're in all the meetings. And by bringing the women into the labor force, the Saudi Arabian economy is exploding. And at $100 crude oil, with a $1 a barrel lifting cost, they're like the Saudis of the old days. They have all the money in the world. And what they're asking me is, how do we buy the mining industry? Because the only potential threat to crude oil is the electrification of the automobile. Elon Musk, who's got $1 trillion valuation and a big mouth, right? So now we're finding unconventional interest in mining assets. Very unconventional interest in mining assets. Very smart people that are looking at how the world is put together. And so the most critical thing about this enterprise is the ESG characteristics of the enterprise that have to be completely thought through in a different way. Rio Tinto destroyed a 45,000-year-old human settlement for 8 days of iron mining. That really happened. Where's the penalty for that? A couple guys lose their job? So it's just phenomenal, the kinds of things that have happened in corporate governance from these major mining companies, the scale of the transformation we require, and I only pray that it's led by women. And Marna's there, she's our president. You know, you have no idea what she goes through, like a mother hen dealing with all these problems. So, to BMO, since 1991, I thank you for your support in our efforts. And it's not like we don't like precious metals. We're building a precious metals mine with nickel and copper. But I'd like you to talk to your kids and explain to them that mining is an honest enterprise and it can be done in a better way. And the reason we need it is to leave a better world to our kids and our grandkids. Thank you.